They gathered at Harrenhal in the heat of a summer's day, as lords great and small pressed into the massive hall to attend the Great Council of 101 AC. The invitation had brought them from every corner of the realm. There were lords bedecked in bright silks from the Reach, their crests and sigils decorating the wide courtyard. There were men in furs and wolf-head clasps from the north, solemn knights and sworn swords from the Stormlands, and proud bannermen from the Westerlands in crimson and gold. But all eyes turned upon two figures around whom the realm's destiny hung. Princess Rhaenys Targaryen, known to some as the Queen Who Never Was, and Prince Viserys Targaryen, the amiable and courteous nephew of King Jaehaerys. By the ancient laws of inheritance, each believed they had a claim to the Iron Throne upon the old king's passing. Yet the Great Council was meant to settle the question definitively, for the sake of peace and stability. At first, there was little doubt among those with the loudest voices that Viserys, being male, would inherit. The tradition was so deeply ingrained that many lords hardly considered the possibility of a woman ascending the throne. Rhaenys, however, was not just any woman. She was the daughter of Prince Aemon, the old king's firstborn son, who had died before he could inherit. Her father's claim had been unquestioned in his lifetime. Now that he was gone, that claim passed to her and, in time, to her children. If the eldest child took precedence, Rhaenys' right was unassailable, except that she was not male, and the realm was used to kings, not queens. Yet House Targaryen had its own ways, its own tradition of sibling marriages and female dragon riders, and the men at court could not fully ignore how such traditions might shape the choice. The old king, racked with grief and age, had thrown the question to this great council in the hope that the lords of the realm would clarify what seemed muddled. Those who spoke for Viserys argued that the male line could not be set aside without undermining centuries of precedent, while those who championed Rhaenys insisted that she was the elder's child, so her right stood above her Uncle Baelin's line. Every house, from the mightiest to the humblest, had sent delegates, sworn swords, or representatives to speak on the matter. Whispers hissed through the corridors of Harrenhal. Lords formed alliances in corners, or made their preferences known through quiet bargains. The meeting would be historic, all agreed, but no one seemed entirely certain of the outcome. Legend would say that Princess Rhaenys carried herself on those days with quiet grace and unbreakable poise. She arrived riding Meleys the Red Queen, the great scarlet-scaled she-dragon with a roar that rattled the battlements of Harrenhal upon her landing. Her husband, the famed explorer and Captain Lord Corlys Velaryon, the sea snake, strode at her side. Her two young children, Laenor and Lena, remained at Driftmark, but their presence in the question loomed large. For if Rhaenys were to be recognized as heir, then in time her children would follow, and House Velaryon blood would sit upon the Iron Throne. The Velaryons, already wealthy, powerful, and intimately tied to the Targaryens, would become nearer to royalty than they had ever been in their ancient history. The scale of Harrenhal reminded all of the Targaryens' might. Even half-ruined, the castle dwarfed any keep in Westeros. From every tower and curtain wall flew banners of black and red, as if the very building itself had pledged to the Targaryen line. Yet in the high hall where the lords gathered, it was the sigils of various noble houses that caught the eye. Among those in attendance was Lord Bormund Baratheon, whose house was kin to Rhaenys through her mother, Jocelyn Baratheon. Bormund was outspoken in her favor. From the north came Lord Rickon Stark, whose imposing figure stood out among the crowd. Lord Stark, taciturn as the winter winds, said little, but when he did speak, it was with the gravity that men heeded. Lord Stark's inclination was rumored to be for the male claimant, out of tradition, yet some suggested that the North's respect for bloodright might see them swayed to Rhaenys. The question loomed for 3 days of heated debate. Lords rose to speak, only to be rebuked by others. A swirl of rumor claimed that bribes were changing hands in dark corners. Chests of gold from King's Landing, from Old Town, from the Reach, from the Westerlands. But the crux of the matter was the law. Should the eldest descendant by direct line of the old king's firstborn son inherit, or should inheritance by male preference prevail? Even if they chose Viserys, many suspected that one day Rhaenys' children might press their claim, sowing dissent. A powerful faction, rumored to be swayed by Bormund Baratheon and Corlys Velaryon's promises of naval support and trade benefits, turned in favor of Rhaenys. Others, pointing out that Viserys was a young man known for his placid, friendly nature, argued he would be the more pliable, less disruptive choice. The faith of the Seven's elders were present, voicing their preference for a king. But the tension in the hall was palpable. On the fourth day, the lords met again, voting in segments. A hush fell as the tallies were compiled. The official counters stepped forward, each delivering a sealed parchment that would declare the will of the Great Council. In the hush of 1,000 breaths held in anticipation, Grand Maester Elisar broke the seal, unrolled the parchment, and began to read. Amid that silence, Rhaenys and Viserys both waited, each controlling their expressions, each prepared to bow to the other if the ruling went against them, for to do otherwise would be unthinkable treason. But Rhaenys felt her heart beating like a drum in her ears. She had grown up hearing she was less fit for inheritance than a son might be, yet she also knew her father's claim had been beyond question before his death. Watching from a short distance, Corlys Velaryon stood tall, his posture that of a man unafraid of any wave that might threaten to capsize him. The words that left Grand Maester Elisar's mouth would ring through the centuries in rumor, half-truth, and songs. By the wisdom of this great council, he concluded after reading the formalities, the succession shall pass first to Princess Rhaenys Targaryen, the daughter and rightful heir of Prince Aemon, who was the firstborn son of his grace, King Jaehaerys Targaryen, the conciliator. Murmurs exploded into thunderous shouting. Dozens of men jumped from their seats. Astonishment shone on their faces, some outraged, some cheering, some confused. Here and there, applause broke out. One or two lords stormed from the hall in protest. Others, including many younger lords and knights, leapt to their feet in celebration of what they saw as a precedent-shattering moment. Rhaenys herself sat frozen for a moment, processing the news as if in a dream. Viserys Targaryen's countenance remained a study of composure. Though pale, he forced a smile upon his face, and he bowed to his cousin. That image would later be captured in tapestry and song. The moment where a prince with the narrower claim accepted his cousin's right, thereby averting a civil war in the immediate. It did not end the controversies, but it began a new era. Long live Princess Rhaenys, they said, though in whispers there were as many men calling her the queen that will be, and others using less kind words to question how the realm could be so overturned by a single vote of lords. The old king, upon hearing the result, summoned Rhaenys and Viserys both. Though he was near blind and struggled to speak, Jaehaerys placed a frail hand on his granddaughter's arm. "You have a heavy burden," he told her, voice rasping with the final weariness of age. "Keep the realm together. Remember mercy, Rhaenys. They will test you, for you are the first of your name in more ways than one." And then, with great difficulty, he made her promise to care for her cousin Viserys, to keep him and his blood close. For the old king had loved all his children and grandchildren fiercely, and he had no desire to see them torn apart. Thus was sown the earliest seed of a fragile but determined unity. Yet no one in the Seven Kingdoms believed that this would be an end to the matter of succession. Rhaenys was already married to Corlys Velaryon, and they had children. Rumors swirled about how the realm's powerful houses would align themselves in the years to come. Some were content to bend the knee to a woman if that was the council's decision. Others seethed. Still others felt the tides of fortune shifting, and scrambled to ensure they would come out on the winning side. A short time later, in King's Landing, ailing King Jaehaerys passed from this life. Morning bells tolled from the Grand September, and black banners flew over the Red Keep. Princess Rhaenys, who had scarcely left the dying king's side, accepted the symbols of monarchy with tears in her eyes. Some said she had never expected the realm to place the crown on her head, but now that it had, she would wear it with all the might and confidence of a Targaryen dragon rider. Yet whispers of discontent followed her on that fateful day. The coronation took place in the Dragon Pit to accommodate the throngs of lords, small folk, and courtiers who arrived to witness history. Meleys the Red Queen perched on high, letting out a cry that echoed over King's Landing and across Blackwater Bay. The High Septon anointed Rhaenys with the 7 oils, albeit with some reservations. The Faith had never crowned a queen regnant, and while they would not openly defy the Great Council's ruling, many Septons found themselves uneasy with the reversal of centuries of tradition. Rhaenys knelt, her head bowed, a hush blanketing the crowd. When the High Septon placed the crown, Valyrian steel set with rubies, upon her silvered hair, the watchers erupted in cheers and roars. Even those harboring doubts could not deny the majesty of the sight. There, clad in a gown of black and red, she rose with chin high. "I am Rhaenys of the House Targaryen," she proclaimed. "The first of my name, Queen of the Undulls, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, Lady of the 7 Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm." And the age of a ruling queen had begun. Though crowned, she knew the difficulties ahead. Many in the realm, even among those who had voted in the council, saw her ascension as an experiment. Others quietly predicted that she would not hold the throne long, that chaos or war might claim the monarchy. But she was determined. In private councils, she spoke with her hand, the man she chose immediately upon ascending. Lord Corlys Velaryon, her husband, the sea snake. Some whispered it was unseemly for a queen's consort to be hand, but Corlys had proven himself wise in the ways of trade, diplomacy, and warfare upon the seas. His voyages had enriched House Velaryon tremendously, and he brought with him a shrewd mind. His seat at the small council table was no courtesy appointment. Rhaenys trusted him as she trusted no one else. Viserys Targaryen, meanwhile, accepted a position as Master of Laws, a gesture that Rhaenys hoped would show the realm her intention to honor her cousin and keep him close in the line of succession. Yet already rumors stirred. Would Viserys' children, should he marry again and have them, lay claim to the throne in defiance of the queen's line? For now, no such child existed. Viserys' wife, Aemma Arryn, had passed away some years ago, leaving no surviving heir besides a single daughter who had not lived more than a few days. Rhaenys did not intend to meddle too deeply in Viserys' personal affairs, but she knew that a second marriage could change everything. She had plans of her own as well, for the children of Corlys and Rhaenys. Laenor and Lena were the future of the Targaryen Velaryon line, and she planned to secure them strong alliances. In her first months of reign, Rhaenys strove to prove she could rule as effectively as any man. She issued edicts aimed at stabilizing trade routes, especially those threatened by pirates harrying merchant ships out of the Stepstones. Acting on Corlys' advice, she invested crown gold in building a new royal fleet, one that would protect commerce and demonstrate the monarchy's might at sea. She also took steps to reorganize the city watch, ensuring that King's Landing remained peaceful. Daemon Targaryen, prince of the city, a flamboyant and bold man, soon arrived from Dragonstone to see his cousin crowned. In the true timeline, he might have orbited around King Viserys. Here, he found a new dynamic, uncertain how to comport himself before a queen. But Rhaenys greeted Daemon warmly, mindful of the loyalty all Targaryens owed one another, and was not blind to the ambition in his lilac eyes. Daemon claimed Caraxes, the blood WRM, as his mount, and boasted that the crown should do more than guard trade routes. The Stepstones themselves should be seized if any threat arose, a direct action to make the realm richer. Rhaenys, aware of the risk, listened to him with an open mind. She would not cast aside the value of a strong Targaryen presence, but she also believed that peace would be the best demonstration of her authority. To that end, she began sending envoys to Dorne, which still refused the authority of the Iron Throne. Jaehaerys had made many inroads there, but the Dornish remained proudly independent. Perhaps a queen might achieve what her male forebears had not, an alliance that would bring Dorne into the 7 Kingdoms willingly. It was an ambitious thought. She set about that task carefully, dispatching diplomats to Sunspear, though mindful of the scorn some Dornishmen might have for Targaryen claims. The realm watched and waited, measuring Rhaenys' competence. Detractors had predicted the realm would soon collapse under a woman's rule, that she lacked the fortitude for royal governance. They judged every move she made. Yet as months turned into a year, then too the 7 Kingdoms did not implode. Peace largely endured, and many turned their attention to daily life rather than the question of the throne's occupant. Gradually, In castle halls and the streets of King's Landing alike, a grudging acceptance grew. The queen was present, strong-willed, and a dragon rider who had proven her might in the sky. The seeds of open rebellion found less fertile soil than some had expected. Still, factions existed. Certain lords, discontent with the elevation of House Velaryon by virtue of the queen's marriage, murmured that the crown showed favoritism to the Driftmark fleet and interests. Whispers circulated about forging alliances to ensure a more proper Targaryen, meaning a male, ascended after Rhaenys' passing. Some pinned their hopes on Viserys, or on Prince Daemon, or even on Prince Baelon Targaryen's rumored bastards, should they exist. Others placed attention on the queen's children, Laenor and Lena. The boy, Laenor, was destined to inherit the throne after his mother, while Lena, a bright and daring girl, showed an affinity for dragons that reminded the court of old Targaryen legends. Meleys, after all, was not the only she-dragon in the world. Rhaenys watched her children grow in the Red Keep. Though they often visited Driftmark to keep ties with their Velaryon heritage, she wanted them visible in the capital, so the lords and small folk could see the future of the realm. Laenor was taught swordsmanship by the Master-at-Arms, an old knight who had served under King Jaehaerys. Lena devoted herself to learning the intricacies of flight and dragon lore, often pestering the dragon keepers for the chance to see eggs hatch in the stone drum on Dragonstone. Meanwhile, the queen showed favor to House Baratheon, awarding Lord Bormund's nephew a prestigious command in the crown's new fleet, reaffirming the alliance that had helped secure her claim. In those early years, a certain hush of tension hung over King's Landing. Many wondered if the queen's reign would be undone by some brash usurper, if the Iron Throne would splinter under a woman's weight. But that moment did not come, and day by day, the queen's reign became more accepted, if not wholeheartedly embraced. The turning point arrived in the third year of Rhaenys' reign, when a crisis threatened to shatter the fragile peace. Off the coast of the Stepstones, the Triarchy, an alliance of Lys, Myr, and Tyrosh, began harassing shipping lanes. These free cities seized merchant vessels, imposed extortionate tolls, and even captured sailors. Recriminations echoed across the narrow sea. Lord Corlys, as the Hand, recognized the threat immediately. Trade had fueled his personal fortunes, and he saw how an unchecked triarchy could strangle Westerosi commerce. Daemon Targaryen, with his thirst for glory, urged an immediate war to conquer or drive out the triarchy from those islands once and for all. Rhaenys had to decide if she would lead the realm into open conflict so early in her reign. Long councils stretched into the night. Viserys Targaryen, as Master of Laws, counseled caution. A protracted war in the Stepstones could be costly and require armies that might drain the royal treasury. The small council was divided, but Corlys believed swift action was needed. Rhaenys considered carefully. She did not want to be known as a queen who shrank from external threats, especially not when said threat endangered the realm's prosperity. Yet she also wished to avoid plunging the Seven Kingdoms into an endless quagmire. She sought a middle path, and so she authorized the construction and dispatch of a royal fleet to patrol the waters near the Stepstones, accompanied by a small force of knights and archers on a handful of ships. Daemon Targaryen clamored to be put in command of the entire operation, and in a show of familial unity, Rhaenys granted him that right, but only under Corlys' guidance. So it was that Daemon and the Sea Snake sailed at the head of the newly formed royal fleet, flying the crowned dragon standard of Queen Rhaenys. The campaign that followed was not a full-scale conquest, but a series of skirmishes and blockades. Daemon, from atop Caraxes, delivered swift attacks on Triarchy warships. Corlys, commanding from the flagship, led the blockade that cut off the Stepstones from supply lines. Over months, the Triarchy's initial advantage shrank, and a precarious stalemate developed. Rhaenys herself, from King's Landing, authorized measured reinforcements and supplies, carefully monitoring the coffers. When news came that the Triarchy was gathering a large fleet to break Daemon's blockade, the Queen made a bold decision. She flew out herself on Meleys, traveling across the narrow sea to provide the final intimidation that might force the Triarchy to negotiate. Seeing the gleaming scales of Meleys in the sky and hearing the thunder of her roar, the Triarchy's admirals faltered. The dreaded might of Dragonfire loomed. A short, sharp engagement followed, in which a few Triarchy ships were burned. The Alliance sued for terms rather than risk devastation at the jaws of 2 Targaryen dragons. A peace was brokered, forcing the Triarchy to remove its war fleets from the Stepstones and respect certain shipping rights for Westerosi vessels. By the time Rhaenys returned to King's Landing, her popularity had grown. Even some who doubted a queen's ability saw how she had ended the threat swiftly, with minimal cost of life and gold. Daemon basked in the triumph, crowing about his victories, and Corlys returned triumphant to the Red Keep. Yet the queen, mindful of the ephemeral nature of such successes, used this moment to further solidify her position. She hosted a great feast in the Red Keep's throne room, inviting lords from across the realm to partake in the Stepstones' victory celebrations. The tapestries of old Valyria looked down upon the assembly, as the realm toasted the queen's victory. Rhaenys, wearing a gown of midnight black decorated with subtle rubies, stood beside Corlys in the seat of honor, graciously receiving the applause. It was not lost on her that in many eyes, it was truly a Targaryen family triumph, a demonstration of the union between House Targaryen and House Velaryon. Yet quietly, she worried that any overshadowed or disgruntled lord might harbor resentment. She resolved to ensure her children's betrothals would tie the realm together. If Laenor could be matched with a daughter of a great house, and Lena could wed a suitable son, she might neutralize potential threats. Rumors abounded that House Hightower of Oldtown was seeking a match, that House Lannister might offer a fair-haired maiden of the Rock, or that House Stark might consider a southern match to build a long-lasting bridge with the crown. Rhaenys took her time, not wishing to rush decisions that would shape the next generation. Another of her concerns was ensuring that no one questioned who would inherit. By tradition, her firstborn son Laenor stood in line for the throne. But the realm had only just accepted the idea of Rhaenys ascending. Might they balk at having a child of Velaryon blood next? The queen believed in her children's claim without reservation, and she recognized that any who opposed it might cause a future conflict. She thus made a point of presenting Laenor at every royal function, seating him at her side, training him in the duties of a future monarch. Some courtiers whispered that the boy was a bit soft-spoken for the role. Others noted that, if anything, Lena had the more commanding presence. But the order of birth was the order of birth, and Rhaenys would not have that challenged. In the midst of these domestic concerns, the realm enjoyed a few short years of peace and prosperity. The royal coffers, thanks to improved trade, swelled. The roads were patrolled by the crown's men. The city watch remained steady under capable leadership, and with Corlys' stewardship of the royal fleet, piracy was kept at bay. Queen Rhaenys held court in the Red Keep's throne room, listening to petitions. She offered justice to commoners and nobles alike. In this, she sought to follow the example of her grandfather, Jaehaerys, who had been known for his wisdom. She soon garnered a reputation for fairness, though not for infinite patience. More than once, she dismissed lords who brought frivolous or self-serving claims, with a stern admonishment that the crown's time would not be wasted. She developed a particular liking for working in the gardens of the Red Keep, where she would stroll and reflect. Some evenings she slipped away to read in the royal library, learning more about Targaryen history, the mistakes and glories of her forebears. She pored over the texts describing Aegon the Conqueror's approach to forging unity, a unity that the Great Council of 101 had nearly shattered by ignoring the rightful line of primogeniture. Despite her growing acceptance, she never forgot that the realm had been inclined to bypass her entirely. Such knowledge kept her vigilant. Her vigilance was tested when certain rumors emerged that Prince Daemon was unhappy with his role in the realm. He had earned glory in the Stepstones, but upon returning, he found himself overshadowed by his cousin the Queen and by Corlys' place as Hand. Daemon served in various capacities, Master of Coin for a brief time, then Commander of the City Watch. The Queen sought to keep him busy and included, aware that an idle demon could be a dangerous demon. Yet he was known for his restlessness and his taste for extremes. He feasted with disreputable companions in the Street of Silk. Stories circulated of Daemon's paramours, of his brazen behavior in Flea Bottom. Concerned about scandal, Rhaenys attempted to counsel him, reminding him that their house's name must not be tarnished. He listened with a smile that did not reach his eyes. Tension flared when Daemon joked that the people called Rhaenys' reign the reign of the Merling Queen, implying that the Velaryons, with their fishlord heritage, truly held the power. The jest reached Rhaenys' ears through her ladies-in-waiting, and though she tried to dismiss it as Daemon's coarse humor, she could not help but be wounded. She summoned Daemon to a private audience, during which she calmly but firmly told him that such remarks, even if made in jest, undermined the Targaryen unity. Daemon bowed, offering a half-sincere apology, and insisted he meant no offense. But something had cracked in their relationship. In that same year, a plague of scale rot erupted among the hatchlings in the dragon pit. Several newly laid eggs failed to hatch properly, resulting in misshapen or stillborn dragonlings. The dragon keepers were baffled, though they tried not to show panic. Queen Rhaenys, alarmed at the prospect of losing future dragons, consulted with maesters. Some said it was a natural phenomenon. Others whispered it was a sign from the gods, that they did not look kindly on a ruling queen. Rhaenys, ever practical, disregarded superstitious claims. She funded the search for more knowledge of dragon care, encouraging any maester or learned person with knowledge of Valyrian lore to come forward. In the end, the scale rot mostly abated, but the incident reminded many that the Targaryens' hold over dragons, while strong, was not invincible. Lena Targaryen, who had grown into a tall and spirited girl, took a particular interest in the matter. Already bonded with a young she-dragon, she spent hours in the dragon pit, consulting with the keepers, learning how to tend to eggs. Rhaenys saw her own reflection in Lena's passion, recalling the day she had first climbed onto Maleza's back. She knew that if ever the day came that her rule was challenged, the realm would have not one, but multiple female dragon riders to defend the throne. The notion comforted her, even as she realized the complicated questions of betrothal pressed upon them. Talk soon rose about betrothing Lena to Prince Daemon. The idea had been floated by Daemon himself, rumor said, as a way to bind himself more tightly to the queen's line and to quell any suspicion he might harbor ambitions of usurpation. But Rhaenys balked at the notion of her daughter wed to the mercurial prince. Instead, she turned her eyes to House Stark. Word reached her that Lord Rickon Stark's son, Edwyle, was a serious, honorable youth, and forging ties with the North might help unify the kingdom behind her line. Yet she could not decide hastily. Lena was still young. Meanwhile, Laenor was nearing manhood. A bride for him had to be found. The obvious choice in many eyes was a daughter of House Baratheon or House Lannister, bridging strong alliances for the next generation. Rhaenys found herself juggling many possibilities, each with ramifications for the stability of her throne. In the 5th year of her reign, a grand tournament was held at King's Landing to celebrate the first name day of Princess Rhaenys' granddaughter, though she had no granddaughter yet, for Laenor was not yet wed. Rather, the tourney was simply announced as a commemoration of peace under Queen Rhaenys. The best knights in the realm gathered to joust, hawkers lined the streets, and the small folk poured in to witness the splendor. The queen and her family took their places in the royal box. The event was meant to display the might of the Targaryen line. Daemon Targaryen won the melee handily, unhorsing several renowned knights. He and Corlys presided over the awarding of the champion's purse. Yet tension simmered beneath the bright banners and cheers. Many whispered that Daemon's ambition might lead him to challenge for the throne eventually. Others speculated that if the queen's children should falter, Viserys might attempt to press his own claim anew, although Viserys himself had shown no sign of disloyalty. The queen strove to ease these rumors. During the final feast of the tourney, she rose to toast her cousin Viserys, praising his loyal service as master of laws and declaring that his counsel had been invaluable. Then she toasted Prince Daemon, lauding his bravery in the stepstones. She did all she could to show unity within House Targaryen. And indeed, the crowd cheered, for the small folk loved spectacles of Targaryen dragons and princes. Nonetheless, in corners and side rooms, the lords and ladies whispered their doubts. A pivotal moment occurred not long after that tourney, when Lord Corlys fell gravely ill. The cause was unknown, a fever that ravaged his body, turning his nights into sweats and chills. Rhaenys hovered at his bedside, anxious that she might lose her husband and most trusted partner in ruling the realm. The realm itself braced, for Corlys was Hand of the Queen, the sea snake whose brilliance was central to her success. For days, the maesters labored, applying all their knowledge. Prayers were said in the septs. Rhaenys rarely left his side, ignoring protocol. Word of Corlys' illness spread across King's Landing like wildfire. Some lords, cynically, readied for a power vacuum. Perhaps Prince Daemon will become Hand if the sea snake passes, they said. Or maybe the queen will name her cousin Viserys. The rumor mill-churned as the tension built. Yet in the final turn of a moon cycle, the fever broke, and Corlys began to recover. Weak but lucid, he resumed his duties as Hand once he could stand without collapsing. The queen, at times drawn and exhausted, emerged from her vigil at his bedside. This brush with mortality crystallized a new determination in Rhaenys. She realized how precarious her reign remained. The realm's acceptance of a queen was still a new phenomenon. One major crisis could unravel everything. Thus, in a decisive move, she announced 2 betrothals. First, she betrothed her son, Laenor, to Lady Rhaena Baratheon, a niece of Lord Bourmond, forging a strong tie with the Stormlands. Second, she arranged for her daughter, Lena, to be betrothed to Lord Edwyle Stark of Winterfell. These unions, she hoped, would stitch the realm together more firmly, ensuring that both the Stormlands and the North would stand solidly behind her children in the years to come. There were some raised eyebrows over marrying her daughter so far north, but Rhaenys believed it prudent to secure that region's loyalty, lest House Stark ever waver in supporting her line. Little did she know how complicated the second betrothal would become. Lena was willful and spirited, and she balked at the idea of leaving the southern courts she knew for the distant, icy land of the north. She had never met Edwyle, a boy a few years older than herself, and the match seemed a cold arrangement in her eyes. For a time, tensions rose between mother and daughter, but Rhaenys stood firm, reminding Lena that as a princess of the realm and the queen's daughter, her duty was to secure alliances that would guard their bloodline. The girl relented, though not without tears. As a gesture of appeasement, Rhaenys promised that Lena might keep her dragon and fly it freely, and that arrangements would be made so that the princess would travel south often, never to be cut off from her heritage. During these same months, Viserys Targaryen, approaching middle age, quietly remarried. His new bride was Lady Alicent Hightower, daughter of the Lord of the Hightower in Old Town. Lady Alicent was known for her courtly grace and piety, and while Rhaenys did not oppose the match, she watched warily. If Viserys and Alicent produced a son, would that boy one day be used as a figurehead for those who denied a woman's right to rule? The queen did not speak her fear aloud, for she had no reason to doubt Viserys' outward loyalty. Yet she remained conscious of the old tension that led to the Great Council in the first place. Lines of succession were never so simple as a name on parchment, especially not with dragons in the mix. The next few years tested the realm's peace once more, as tensions rose with the Iron Islands. The Reavers under Lord Reaper of Pike were said to be raiding ships along the western coasts, and House Lannister demanded the crown take action. Rhaenys had no wish to be drawn into a protracted conflict with the Ironborn if it could be avoided. She commanded swift retribution for any raids that violated the king's peace. To underscore her seriousness, she dispatched part of her royal fleet. Lord Corlys oversaw the strategy, stationing warships out of Lannisport to protect merchant fleets. After a few bloody skirmishes at sea, the Ironborn quieted down, though none knew for how long. Still, the Queen's firm response again demonstrated that a woman on the throne could be every bit as formidable as a man. As the seasons turned, people started to speak of Rhaenys less as the Queen who never was, and more often simply as the Queen. Songs were composed praising her wise rule and her skill in riding melees, celebrating her vibrant presence at court. Some went so far as to compare her to Visenya Targaryen, sister-wife of Aegon the Conqueror, though that might have been flattery. She did possess a certain imperious majesty that commanded respect. Standing tall, silver-gold hair braided with small rubies. The queen cut an imposing figure at tourneys and feasts. Small folk who glimpsed her rumored that she was not to be crossed. The grace and generosity she showed could vanish in an instant if tested by treachery. She had proven her willingness to use the power of dragons, after all, in the Stepstones. Yet the illusions of security could be deceiving. Beneath the surface, the old question still simmered. Should a woman wear the crown? Religious zealots in the Riverlands occasionally preached that the gods had cursed the realm for violating tradition. Roguish lords in the Westerlands or the Reach might quietly speak to each other over cups of wine about whether a male Targaryen could be put forth in time. Some pinned secret hopes on Viserys' line, especially if Alicent Hightower bore him a son. Others looked to Daemon, whose flamboyant presence cast a long shadow. Daemon was known to frequent brothels and taverns in the city, forging connections with all manner of dangerous characters. The queen, though, continued her efforts to keep Daemon's loyalty. She gave him a place of honor at her feasts, lavished praise on his victories, and occasionally offered him tasks abroad so that his restless energy might be sated. A new shift in the realm came when House Stark finally summoned Lena to Winterfell for the formal betrothal ceremony. The trip was to be made by ship first, sailing around the eastern coast, then continuing north to White Harbor, and from there by horse to Winterfell. The journey was long, and Lena was accompanied by a royal retinue, plus her dragon, which would fly overhead for part of the way. Rhaenys felt a pang of regret sending her daughter so far away, but she steeled herself, knowing that forging strong bonds with the North was crucial. The betrothal ceremony was said to be a solemn affair, overshadowed by Winterfell's gray skies, but Edwyle Stark showed courtesy and a certain quiet warmth that surprised Lena. Over time, the match might bring genuine affection, or so Rhaenys hoped. Not long after, Laenor wed Rhaena Baratheon in King's Landing in a lavish ceremony that all the realm's great lords attended. Even the Lord of the Iron Islands was present, albeit glowering. The Targaryens and Valerians spared no expense, for this union would one day produce the heirs to the throne. Dancers performed in the torchlit yards of the Red Keep, the smell of roasted boar and spiced wine filling the air. Many said the highlight of the celebration was the aerial display. Malays, sea smoke, and other dragons soared over Blackwater Bay, breathing jets of flame in what appeared to be a carefully choreographed dance. The small folk cheered rapturously at the sight, a reminder that House Targaryen, and by extension, their queen, possessed the greatest power in the known world. With her children's futures taking shape, Rhaenys felt a measure of relief. Her line would carry on, and the realm, for the moment, seemed stable. Yet in the 8th year of her reign, a dire threat arose once more in the Stepstones. The Triarchy, stinging from their earlier defeat, had never fully abandoned their ambitions. New leadership in Lys and Myr began to muster forces again. Spies reported the construction of war galleys, the recruitment of sellswords, and alliances with pirate crews. Prince Daemon, who maintained contacts in the Free Cities, warned the queen that trouble brewed, that the Triarchy might try to strike a surprise blow. Rather than wait, Rhaenys decided on a show of strength. She instructed Corlys to gather a significant part of the royal fleet. Daemon and Viserys both advised her on the plan. She also decided to accompany the fleet herself, if only to show the Triarchy that the queen was no figurehead. The realm's lords had grown used to the notion of a queen, but none could deny the intimidation factor of seeing the Red Queen in flight over the narrow sea. What followed was a tense standoff. The Triarchy's ships gathered near the Stepstones, but upon sighting the might of the Westerosi fleet, and the presence of 2 adult dragons, Malays and Caraxes, they hesitated. Skirmishes erupted, but the Triarchy's admirals balked at committing to a full engagement. Rhaenys, from the deck of Corlys' flagship, oversaw the blockade, calling for terms. The war might have been over quickly, except that Lyseni and Myrish forces tested the blockade with small attacks. One such attack nearly claimed the life of Viserys, whose ship was boarded in a sudden dawn raid. He fought bravely, or so the tale says, sustaining a wound in the shoulder before Daemon and his knights arrived to drive off the raiders. The seriousness of Viserys' injury prompted the queen to unleash a more devastating show of force. She flew Malaise into the heart of the Triarchy's anchored fleet, unleashing gouts of dragonfire on a line of war galleys. Black smoke and screams filled the sky. Dozens of enemy vessels were destroyed in a single morning of carnage. The Triarchy's survivors retreated, and those that could not escape surrendered. Once more, Rhaenys had proven the potency of Targaryen power. Returning to King's Landing, she found her popularity surging anew. The small folk might have murmured about a queen's right to rule in years past, but now they saw she commanded dragons and navies with authority. Her seat upon the Iron Throne no longer seemed a point of question. Poets sang of the Dragon King's wrath, praising her decisive action against the Triarchy. Diplomatic overtures reached her from the free cities of Pentos and Volantis, seeking trade agreements and alliances with the queen who had humbled Lys, Myr, and Tyrosh twice. But as if to balance these victories, tragedy struck soon after. While Corlys recovered from an old war wound that had begun to pain him again, the queen found herself facing a stark choice about Daemon Targaryen. He was discovered embroiled in a scandal involving some highborn ladies of the court. Worse yet, rumors alleged that he had seduced one of Rhaenys' own ladies-in-waiting. The scandal threatened to tarnish the monarchy's image. Reluctantly, Rhaenys concluded that Daemon had become too great a liability in King's Landing. She commanded him to depart for Dragonstone, to oversee certain royal matters there, effectively exiling him from the court. Daemon took this as a grave insult. In a heated confrontation in the throne room, witnessed only by a few guards, he berated Rhaenys for valuing the whispering tongues of pious fools over the loyalty of a dragon rider. His words bordered on treasonous. Rhaenys rose from the Iron Throne and declared in a cold, clear voice that he would go to Dragonstone or face her wrath. Cowed, Daemon bowed stiffly and departed. That night, Caraxes soared over the Blackwater, heading for Dragonstone, a stream of red fire trailing in the sky like a burning omen. Many wondered if the rift between Daemon and the crown might one day lead to open conflict. But for now, he left peaceably enough, though a scowl darkened his face as he flew. In the years that followed, Rhaenys solidified her legacy through numerous royal progresses across the realm. She toured the Stormlands, where she visited the newly built fortress that Baratheon men had constructed near Shipbreaker Bay. She traveled to Old Town, riding Malaise low enough that the city's inhabitants could see the shimmer of her scales. She even ventured north as far as the Neck, meeting with representatives from Winterfell. Everywhere she went, she commanded respect, for the presence of a living dragon and a crowned queen in one figure was a sight to behold. The Faith, seeing that she did not trample on their rights or subvert their authority, grew more accepting of her. The High Septon in Old Town eventually performed a special blessing, praising the queen's efforts to maintain peace in the realm. The queen's children continued to grow into adulthood, forging their paths. Laenor and his wife, Rhaena Baratheon, resided largely in the royal court, though they also spent time on Driftmark, building stronger ties with House Velaryon. Whispers began to circulate about Laenor's inclinations. Some said he cared little for women, but the queen dismissed gossip that had no direct bearing on state affairs. What mattered was that the pair would produce heirs in due time. As for Lena, she and Edwyle Stark wed at Winterfell in a solemn ceremony attended by many northern lords. The new Lady Stark soon charmed the north with her fiery spirit and her dragon, which she kept on a rocky outcropping near the Dreadfort after it proved too large to be stabled in Winterfell's courtyards. Some northerners were uneasy about a dragon so far north, but the presence of Targaryen power in Winterfell also deterred any rebellious thoughts. In time, Rhaenys at last welcomed her first grandchildren. Laenor and Rhaena produced a son, named Aemond Valerion Targaryen in a nod to Rhaenys' father, Prince Aemon. The babe had silver hair and the purple eyes of old Valyria, to the delight of the court. Celebrations rang out in King's Landing, for here was the next generation of Targaryen rulers, tying together House Baratheon and House Velaryon blood with the Targaryen line. The queen beamed with pride as she held her grandson for the first time. She declared that one day he would claim a dragon's egg, and that he would be second in line to the throne behind his father, Laenor. Across the realm, lords raised cups in honor of the newest Targaryen scion. Even Daemon, from Dragonstone, sent a curt letter of congratulations. Viserys and Alicent, who had children of their own by now, 2 daughters, no sons, dutifully attended the celebrations, offering gifts and kind wishes. Tension between the lines of succession seemed far away in those moments of familial joy. Yet outside the royal joys, the realm's shifting alliances never ceased. House Lannister, seeing its prominence overshadowed by the growing might of House Velaryon and House Baratheon, flexed its muscles in the Westerlands. They fortified the Golden Tooth and taxed trade caravans crossing the hills, to the irritation of the Riverlands. In the Reach, House Tyrell reaped bountiful harvests and stored large surpluses of grain, giving them leverage over the crown's food supplies. Rhaenys had to tread carefully, keeping each region content without allowing any single house to become too powerful. She held councils with the great lords, distributed royal grants, and occasionally reminded them of her draconic might by flying Malays to visit their seats. The tapestry of alliances that held the realm together under her rule was delicate, but she managed it skillfully, taking counsel from Corlys, Viserys, and the Small Council. Perhaps the greatest threat to her reign arose in the 10th year, when a band of rebellious lords in the Vale declared that a woman on the throne was a travesty and refused to pay taxes. The ringleaders were minor lords, yet they rallied a few knights to their cause, claiming that they fought in the name of old undull traditions which forbade female inheritance. They began to burn tax caravans traveling from Gulltown to the Eyrie, and they even kidnapped a royal tax collector, demanding that the Iron Throne repeal the injustice of a queen's reign. If they had hoped to incite the Vale at large to rebellion, they failed. House Arryn, led by Lord Donnell Arryn, had remained neutral in the disputes over female succession. Moreover, many in the Vale respected the memory of Aemma Arryn, Viserys' first wife, and by extension felt a familial tie to House Targaryen. Queen Rhaenys did not wait for the rebellion to grow. She promptly dispatched a royal force to Gulltown, led by seasoned commanders loyal to the crown. She also directed Malays into the Vale's skies. Spotting the rebel knights encamped in mountain passes, she unleashed dragonfire on their fortifications. The rebels surrendered almost at once, realizing that their cause was hopeless against a Targaryen queen astride a dragon. Rhaenys demanded their leaders in chains and publicly tried them in Gulltown for treason. Some she executed, others she condemned to the Night's Watch, sending them up the King's Road in black wagons. This swift and merciless response cowed other would-be rebels. If once they believed a queen might be too soft or timid to crush dissent, they now stood corrected. The sight of charred fortifications in the Vale's rugged terrain reminded them that the line of Aegon the Conqueror still reigned, and that the sex of the monarch did not alter the fearsome nature of dragonfire. Over time, as the realm saw repeated demonstrations of her will, more and more lords came to view Queen Rhaenys' rule as inevitable, if not entirely conventional. The following years brought joys and sorrows alike. Princess Laena's next children were twin girls, healthy and bright, while Princess Lena in the north gave birth to a son of her own, strengthening ties between Winterfell and the crown. Yet Lord Corlys' health waned further. Age and old injuries caught up with him, and the queen worried for the day she would lose the sea snake's steady hand. She named new members to the Small Council, ensuring that loyal and capable figures would guide the realm if Corlys could no longer serve. Daemon remained aloof on Dragonstone, but any hope he might have had of challenging the queen seemed to fade under the weight of her accomplishments and the number of heirs in her line. Viserys, on the other hand, quietly built a family of his own, fathering several daughters with Alicent Hightower, but never the son that might threaten Rhaenys' line. In the 12th year of her reign, a grand festival was held in King's Landing to mark her name day, an event that drew thousands. Tapestries in the throne room depicted scenes of her reign. The victory over the Triarchy, the quelling of the Vale Rebellion, the forging of alliances through her children's marriages. Many visitors from Essos arrived, merchants and nobles alike, seeking trade or favor. Even the Prince of Dorne, though not bending the knee officially, sent envoys with gifts, acknowledging the formidable presence of a queen who might one day bring Dorne under the Iron Throne's banner through persuasion or conquest. Standing on the balcony of the Red Keep, looking over the city's rooftops and the winding Blackwater Bay, Rhaenys reflected on the world she had helped shape. Had the Great Council chosen Viserys, none of this would be. She might have lived quietly on Driftmark, overshadowed, her claim forgotten. Instead, she had steered the Seven Kingdoms through more than a decade of relative peace and prosperity. While no reign was free of trouble, she had faced foes in the Stepstones, conspirators in the Vale, and simmering tensions elsewhere. She could look upon the realm and see stability. Where the seeds of war might once have taken root, they had withered beneath her consistent demonstration of power and authority. She made her way to the throne room, escorted by a guard in cloaks of gold. There, the Iron Throne loomed, that jagged silhouette of melted swords. She ascended the steps, unafraid. She had sat that throne for years now, and though it had cut her once or twice in the early days, she wore those scars as a reminder that the crown came with a cost. She lowered herself onto the seat. The hall was packed with courtiers, lords, ladies, and knights who had come to pay homage on her name day. Viserys stood near the front, Alicent beside him. Further on, the tall, broad-shouldered presence of Lord Bormund Baratheon, now gray in the beard, bowed deeply to her. A cluster of northern lords from Winterfell, White Harbor, and the Barrowlands stood to one side, representing her daughter's new home. Messengers from Dorne lingered at the edges of the crowd, watchful and curious. Lord Lannister, decked in crimson finery, offered a polite, if perfunctory, salute. In the shadows near the pillars, Rhaenys caught sight of a cloaked figure who might have been Daemon, though he kept his face partially obscured. At the far end, the small folk parted as her grandchildren darted in, chasing each other in laughter, their silver hair shining like a promise of Targaryen continuity. She accepted tributes and kind words, graciously thanking each lord for their loyalty. A troupe of jugglers performed to the crowd's delight. Musicians played a new ballad praising Rhaenys the Just, the dragon of the realm. The queen allowed herself a moment of pride. She saw in the watchers' eyes not the condescension or skepticism that once greeted her ascension, but respect and, in many cases, genuine admiration. Though she had been placed on the throne by the Great Council's decision, it was her subsequent deeds that had cemented her legitimacy. When the final notes of the ballad ended, and the hush of anticipation returned, Queen Rhaenys rose from the Iron Throne. She stood with the regal poise that had become her trademark, her gaze sweeping over all assembled. The sound of her voice, clear and resonant, reached the far corners of the hall. "My lords, my ladies, good people of King's Landing, I thank you for your attendance on this day. We have enjoyed many years of peace. We have faced trials by sea and by land, and by the grace of the Seven and the might of our dragons, we have prevailed. Today is a day for celebration, but let us also remember that the realm's unity, its prosperity, demands our diligence. May we stand together, as one people, beneath the crown and its promise of justice." A roar of applause answered her words. Trumpets blared, and the crowd parted for her procession out to the courtyard, where a ceremonial flight on Malays would cap the festivities. She moved down the aisle, hearing the murmurs of "Long live the Queen," feeling the warmth of that well-wishing. Outside, the bright sun glinted off the Red Keep's walls. Stable hands hurried to prepare Malays. Stepping into the courtyard, she caught a glimpse of Corlys, now older, leaning on a cane carved in the likeness of a ship's prow. He nodded approvingly. She kissed his cheek, a gesture of public affection that caused a smattering of cheers. Then she turned, placing a hand on Malays's warm scales. The dragon rumbled low in her throat, acknowledging her rider. With a practiced motion, Rhaenys climbed the side rigging and settled onto the saddle. She looked out over the throng one last time, found her grandchildren's wide eyes, and smiled in reassurance. Then she gave a slight nudge with her heels. Malays spread her great crimson wings and launched into the air. A rush of wind pushed onlookers back. Dust swirled across the courtyard as the dragon soared upward, carrying the queen high above King's Landing. From that vantage, Rhaenys saw the sprawl of the city, the glint of the Blackwater, the distant hills. She wondered what Aegon the Conqueror must have thought when he flew over these lands for the first time, or what her father Aemon might have done had he lived to rule. Yet it was her time now. Circling once, she guided Meleys toward the sky above the dragon pit, letting out a roar that reverberated across every cobblestone. The people below craned their necks, pointing, cheering, and in some places cowering. The queen was more than an abstract figure. She was a dragon rider, the blood of old Valyria, and the rightful occupant of the Iron Throne. For a fleeting moment, Rhaenys closed her eyes, felt the wind against her face, and exhaled a breath of gratitude. Whatever the realm had once believed about a woman on the throne, she had proven them wrong. She had steered the ship through storms, guided by her faith in her birthright, buoyed by the support of her husband, her cousin, and the many loyal lords who recognized her claim. Landing back near the Red Keep, she dismounted gracefully. Servants rushed to attend Meleys, offering fresh meat. Courtiers pressed forward to greet the queen. Pages carried her trailing cloak. She heard the clamor of half a dozen voices shouting for her attention. Petitions, congratulations, requests for mercy, offers of alliance. She stood among them, unruffled by the noise and chaos, every inch the monarch. That evening, she presided over a final feast for her name day. An array of courses was served: roast swan, honeyed lamprey pie, lemon cakes shaped like small dragons. Musicians played, and acrobats from Pentos performed astonishing contortions. At the high table, Rhaenys smiled at her family. Laenor and Rhaena, Viserys and Alicent, Corlys with his cane, her newborn grandchildren gurgling with nursemaids. A measure of contentment filled her as she surveyed the guests, all paying homage to the queen who had defied centuries of tradition. Even Prince Daemon made an appearance, though he kept mostly silent, sipping wine. As the feast wound down, Rhaenys rose to say a few final words. Candlelight glinted off the rubies in her hair. A queen must always remember the debt she owes to her subjects, for without their faith, the realm cannot stand. The Iron Throne is a burden, not a right to be taken lightly. As I look upon you all, I see the lords and ladies, knights and maesters, merchants and envoys, who have contributed to these years of peace. I promise you that I shall continue to govern with a firm but fair hand, to guard the realm from threats external and internal, and to honor the legacy of my grandsire, the old king, who wished for nothing more than unity. May we continue forward as one people, under the watchful eyes of the Seven, and under the wings of our dragons. Raising her cup, she toasted the realm. A chorus of voices echoed, "To the Queen!" The air felt charged with a mixture of relief, triumph, and the unspoken hope that no new storm would rise to test her. But storms always came in time. Perhaps an entire generation would pass before the realm forgot the reasons for Rhaenys' ascension and challenged the line of succession anew. Perhaps certain lords, emboldened by future strife, would conjure old arguments. But for that moment, in the warm glow of the feast's candles, in the hush before the next turning of fate's wheel, Rhaenys Targaryen's rule seemed certain, her legacy written in bright letters for all to see. And so it was that the Great Council's choice in 101 AC forever changed the course of Targaryen history. Instead of a king, the realm had accepted a queen. Instead of open warfare over the succession, the lines of inheritance were clarified, though not without lingering doubts. Rhaenys, the daughter of Prince Aemon, defied naysayers, sat astride her dragon, and held the 7 kingdoms together with a steady hand and an iron will. Where once men had said women could not rule, now they said, "There has been one who did, and she was a dragon indeed." If only they had known then how the seeds sown by her reign would sprout in future generations. Some in peace, some in strife, but all shaped by the undeniable fact that a queen had proven her mettle, and the Targaryen dynasty would never be the same.